Michael Ondaatje is considered one of Canada's most important contemporary writers. In the novel In the Skin of a Lion, he dwells on the work, labor, and energy invested in Canada by those settlers who are seen as outsiders. In order to do research and study on the infrastructure of Toronto, he entered the archive and used the sources that he had found. Interestingly enough, his research question changed as he explored the materials. He was more intrigued about what he could not find in the archive. The curiosity grew regarding the pieces of history that were undocumented and erased from the face of the earth. Throughout his research process for this novel, he realized that there were countless of narratives that were not accounted for. The people who helped construct Toronto's buildings were not given the credit where it's due, and with writing them in the novel, he puts his founded information to use to unveil the missing history of the archives. It is a collection of selected pieces which helps expose the untold history of the masses of the immigrants. In the Skin of a Lion is a novel that depicts the constant struggles and hardships which the characters go throughout their lives. The prevalence of marginalizing the immigrants is a recurring theme in Canadian history. Ondaatje gave voice to the forgotten history of immigrants, and just like in today's society, the immigrants had to endure marginality and invincibility. As Ondaatje restores working class individuals to a particular piece of Canadian history, he deviates from historical discourse in ways that include the figuring of bodies of immigrants. Just like in today's society, the economic impact of immigrants is a complex issue and one that simply models of supply and demand. These men are the workers who provide the means of production for the rich. The government benefits from their hard work and effort. However, they are treated inhumanely and are deserted to live miserably because of racial issues. Currently in the US, dangerous situations are unfolding for immigrants as they are held in traumatizing conditions. The novel contains information that encapsulates the struggles of the working immigrants. In order to fully understand the concept of their disturbing and tragic reality, one must read the book several times as it grows to you the more you read it. The novel greatly dives into the stories of the unsung heroes, and their stories engage the audience to read it over and over again to truly grasp the historical content. Each time you read the novel, you're able to pick up new information that strongly ties the story, and the threading of characters add depth to the message that the author is trying to convey, which is vividly bringing to life the people behind Toronto's landmarks. In telling the story, Ondaatje weaves together the stories of immigrants, businessmen, and architects that were involved in the making of the landmarks. By revealing Toronto's untold history, Ondaatje creates an intriguing read for the audience and in some ways educates the people about the untold history of Toronto's landmarks. And it sheds light to a lesser known element of the Canadian history. The novel contains the stories, the triumph, the tragedy of what the immigrants has gone through, and Ondaatje was brave for doing so as it opens up discussions about the untold past of Toronto, the untold stories of the immigrants, the excluded part of what should have been known. The solid premises of this novel is that the body only becomes significant if it belongs to someone significant. We are reminded of this in a very literal way when we discover that there has not even been a body count of those who died in the viaduct and waterworks projects described in the novel, let alone an acknowledgement of the workers. One of the triggering moments in this novel was when Patrick realized later on that he had learned important things. The way children learn from watching how adults angle a hat or approach a strange dog, or he knew how much a piece of dynamite the size of a bullfrog could destroy. He was able to absorb everything from a distance, and he was able to learn from his father one of the easiest and most dangerous work. And this gives an audience an idea of what they go through on a daily basis, and in some cases, no matter how difficult it is, they would have to remove their clothes and grease themselves down with oil from crankcase of the steam donkey. They had to eventually locate the log where they need to put themselves in to be safe. And the amount of work that they have to put in order to reemerge themselves from seeing the explosions that they saw in the woods, and how they had to lay the charges against the rock and the ice and the trees. And the fact that Patrick and his father had to gasp out of the air and having to lie back on the ice in order to pull themselves up and roll away to free themselves from the rope, and frantically trying to get water out of their ears and their eyes, and just shows the struggle. The single visual concept. Many of the bodies in the novel are abused either by hard manual labor or by the deliberate infliction of pain by another, and require care and attention. Bodies are painted, dyed, tattooed, and greased, and the novel is rife with living bodies, and we are brought to the attention by the many references to physical sensation like cold, heat, damp, hunger, longing, exhaustion, and especially pain. The location in time and space. For the characters, the hours seem too long as they have to work underground and work long hours to be able to create and construct everything that they had to. And mentally, they were not there as they were treated inhumanely because they were not being given the recognition that they needed. They didn't get enough support from those that ordered them to do such things, to do such manual labors, and they struggled a lot. They were physically there in the location that they were in, but mentally and emotionally, they were absent. The real stories. Ondaatje notes that the men work in the equivalent of the fallout of a candle, which is a metaphor that points to the limited lighting in the dark tunnel where a burning candle could not provide adequate. His novel fictionalizes the lives of those migrants and minorities that participated in the construction of Toronto in the early 1900s. They are the ones who built Toronto's waterworks and viaducts, a community intentionally left out of Canadian history. These heroic men who died during the construction of the waterworks and the city remained anonymous and invincible. In the novel, when asked, Harris states no record was kept. There was no record because as immigrants they were considered insignificant despite their contribution to the city. Ondaatje explores alternatives in fictional discourse, and rather than having the bodies in the novel represent something other than themselves, Ondaatje reclaims them as sites of meaning, as extensions of the self. Ondaatje works highlights an unhidden history, especially the issues surrounding immigration and the continued struggle for an acceptable division of power within changing social constructs. He aimed to give voice and beauty to the work of the disenfranchised. He redeems the immigrant laborers who perform backbreaking work and sacrifice their lives in order to build Toronto. Ondaatje exposes how immigrants are not homogeneous, but that they occupy many worlds simultaneously. Ondaatje was able to discuss a forgotten history, race, and ethnicity that remains a constant variable that influences identities, experiences, and outcomes of immigrants in Canada. Ondaatje mainly focused on the key character identities of Nicholas Temakov and Patrick Lewis. and Andante brings to life the artistry of their sufferings. He also cleverly demonstrates the prevailing injustices and exploitation of the capitalist system to the character of Captain Harris. In summary, Ondaatje's In the Skin of a Lion demonstrates his awareness of the social stigma that exists towards newcomers. By revealing Toronto's untold history, Ondaatje creates a classic. It simply revealed us to ourselves. It enables us to not only reflect on the past, but to examine the origins of the contemporary Canadian society.